Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 10th Institute's webinar series. I'm Perry Scholes, CEO and founder of Corporate Internship Leadership Institute, and I'd just like to take a minute or two to tell you a little bit about the Institute. We are 501c3, not-for-profit, that's founded here in New Orleans in 2019. And our focus really under that umbrella, we're trying to do really two things that are important in the internship space. One is Internship Central, where we created a job database to connect employers who are looking for interns for paid internships, and also students who are looking for internship opportunities. And so any student in the region or around the state can post their resume, and any employer who has a paid internship opportunity can post a job. And we're hoping that as that Internship Central grows, it will be a great place for one-stop shopping for paid internships. Second part of our work is around the 10th Institute. And the 10th Institute, I'd like to talk to you about our talent pipeline strategy. Next slide. So this strategy, when fully realized, will have three programs or three elements that really are focused on students of color that are pursuing an academic experience. And so we're not doing anything to get that student into college. What we are trying to do is make sure that when they get into college, as early as the freshman year, they begin to think about the career process. And then that's where we kick in to really help them to understand that process and then make connections to corporations and companies. So the first program is a residency program focused on freshman and sophomore. And what we're doing here is making an attempt to re-engineer the campus visit process, if you will. Typically, a representative from a corporation will go on campus, book a room, and do a presentation, and you get to meet the recruiter and maybe one other representative from the company. What we're doing is taking groups of freshmen and sophomore from community college, technical college, four-year colleges, and we're going to bring them to the corporation to go for a visit and let those corporations connect with our students of color so they can see there is in fact talent. There is in fact talent right here in our backyard, and that then those organizations can have someone from IT, someone from accounting, someone from marketing come down into a conference room or an auditorium and spend time connecting with our students. And then while we have these students in the residency program, we're also working on personal branding, financial wellness, business etiquette. And those students in that program will be paid a stipend for participating in the programming elements that we have. The next element that we have is internships. And the internships, I'm proud to say, has started, and we have an amazing cohort for 2021 of some really bright and amazing students. Those are juniors and seniors, and we have a handful of sophomores that are in our cohort. The internships that they participate in are typically 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the organization. We like to get the students at least 2 summers because we realize that 2 times that bad is better than 1 or none, particularly, and the student can really start to translate the work experience to the academic experience. And we know from some research that even grade point averages improve through internship opportunities. This program is focused on an individual development plan, where we're working with those students to try to perfect some of the business acumen that they need and prepare them for the internship opportunities that they will be going into. Their coaches and mentors in the program, and also professional branding, financial wellness is also continues to be a component. And then the last, because we don't want to love students for 4 years and then let them go, we think that there is an important element of the alumni network where that student really does need connection in a network in their post-academic years. first couple of years as a professional. And so our alumni network will be an opportunity for them to continue to engage with us and even come back into the program and help us with development at the residency and the internship level. So this is the work that we're doing. Our intention is to be, we're starting in New Orleans and Baton Rouge region, and eventually we'll be around the state of Louisiana. So we're here this morning to talk about Self-Care 101, College Edition. And so I'm really excited to have our speakers, Mr. and Mrs. Gross, and they are here to join us and talk about self-care. And I am very much looking forward to it. So thank you very much for being here. Why don't you guys, introduce yourselves and then jump right into your content.
Definitely. So my name is Dr. Bantu Gross, and I'm joined today by my wife, who can come off mute and introduce her name.
Dr. Tyra Gross. I'm an assistant professor of public health sciences at Xavier, HBCU, right by the interstate here in New Orleans.
Awesome. Yeah, and so we're very grateful to Mr. Perry Scholes, about to call him Dr. Perry Scholes. Maybe he needs to get a PhD as well. Send him to school. Since he's telling everyone else to go to school, send him back to school. And so what we want to do today is talk a little bit about self-care. And I think this message is probably right on point with all that is going on in our country. We know about the recent verdict that just came down a few days ago in the Derek Chauvin case. Some people may feel some kind of way about it. And then the recent shootings that happened. So there's a lot of things going on. And I know I was actually talking with my wife the other day about how, I'm not going to talk to certain types of people, certain groups of people about issues of race or what just happened, because I know that it may not be good for my health. And I want to be in a good place. I want to laugh right now. I want to be joyful right now. And I think that's one of those things that at times when I was younger, I didn't really take that advice. But now that I'm much older, maybe wiser, I tend to avoid situations that might be a little bit too toxic for me. And so that's what I think of when I think of self-care. And so I'll let my wife share a little bit about her take on self-care before we really dive into it.
Well, one thing that I think about is when I started as a professor at Xavier, that was fall 2015, I was also pregnant with this guy's first kid, our first kid together, right? So I've learned a lot about self-care, one, from trying to navigate marriage, motherhood, and career, like being new to like all of those areas while trying to continue to be a high achiever. So I bumped my head a lot because I wanted it. I had all these expectations, and then I had all these stressors. And while I was pregnant and a new professor, I lost my grandmother and my favorite uncle. Everybody has an uncle that's like their favorite uncle. Like, you may not tell everybody it's my favorite uncle, but it's understood. And so in the same week that I was supposed to have my baby shower, I lost like 2 people that I really loved. And I was already like vulnerable, being a Black woman in America in a high position, pregnant, a lot of different stuff. And then also my students were coming to me and still come to me, and especially come to me now because it's a pandemic. And so it's always like, I have to model self-care for my students. I have to model self-care and healthy boundaries for my children, for my husband. If I'm going to continue to do anything that looks like excellence or just like do mediocre things, if I want to just be here, then I need to learn how to take better care of myself. And my background is public health, nutrition, health behavior. So it's like, I know what the science and the research says, but how do you like apply that when you're like navigating all of these things in a pandemic and police brutality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. All right. So just to give you guys a little bit of an overview of what we'll be getting into today. First, we'll be talking about college students and pandemic health. This is something that has never happened before. I don't know if this is something you want to take solace in, but you will be the only college students that can say that you went to college during a pandemic. entered college during the pandemic or exited college with a degree during the pandemic. And so there are a lot of different things that college students are going through that are unique to them that we adults, those not in college, don't quite understand. And so we kind of want to talk about that. Next, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what is self-care. What are some definitions, components, and benefits? I think at times, you know, we hear people say in passing, like, take care of yourself, take care of yourself. And so we kind of want to break that down a little bit. And then finally, we'll talk about the practical side of it, how to practice self-care. What are some everyday strategies you can employ? And then also for those that like to read and check our websites, we'll have some resources for you guys to look at. And so we touched
plug on that picture. So the reason why we had the picture, you know, we all miss traveling, flying to exotic destinations, but they always tell you put on your own mask first. And we know the mask that we wear on a daily basis now, we definitely need to put on our mask to protect ourselves and others. But that was an intentional picture of putting on your own mask first so that you can take care of yourself before you engage or are of service to others.
Thank you for that explanation. And so we've kind of touched a little about who's talking today. And so when we did our introductions, we shared with you guys about self-care from an adult perspective, because we're on the other side of that college degree. And so we do want to keep the focus on college. And so we will probably share a little about our own experiences in college and some of the ways that we took care of ourselves or did not take care of ourselves as a way to say, hey, current college student, here are some gems for you to hold on to, so that way you can be better than me, or better than us. And so we're going to talk about self-care, how we're practicing it, and we're also going to talk a little bit about what we know. And so college students and pandemic health. So from classroom to class Zoom. So that was me. I came up with class Zoom. I don't know if it's been coined or not, but I was really impressed with myself when I came up with that. So yeah, so hold the applause, hold the applause. And so it's a different world we're in right now with this class Zoom that we have, where we're in front of the camera, we're not really out and about, and it's just different. It's hard. It weighs on individuals having to be in front of a computer screen all day long, and it's an adjustment. I know one of the things that I remember when this first happened in March of 2020, speaking with a professor, she shared with me that there were some older teachers that were checking out saying, I'm not doing Zoom. I'm just checking out. I can't do it. The learning curve, it's too real for me. It's too difficult. And so when I heard that, I thought to myself, but you weren't being that lenient to freshmen who were entering college for the first time when they were having difficulties with turning in assignments and things like that. And so one of the things that I saw early on, and I think a lot of people noticed as well, is that we seem to be a little bit more compassionate early on in the pandemic when it came to like, okay, it's hard on everybody. People have children running around in the background and whatnot. And so it's going to be real hard to do class on Zoom. And so I think the end of last year, because it happened in March, so we had March, April, May, some people were a little bit more lenient when it came to assignments and grades and things like that. So I think everyone kind of had a pass. And so now coming into this year, August up until now, it seems like things have kind of ramped back up to where they used to be, but not quite there yet. I know some professors have adjusted, some students have adjusted, and some are still struggling just because of different things. And so while I have 2 college students online right now, I kind of like to know from you guys, what has your experience been like? In a minute or two, could one or both of you share something about your current experience in college and how it is adjusting to the Zoom life?
It was very difficult for me. It was like hard because a lot of the classes that I had were classes that need to be taught in person. So by it not being taught in person and online, it just made things just very, very difficult. Along with like the adjustment at home, because like you have siblings and stuff who may be with you, you know, so you gotta like share like laptops and stuff because you weren't prepared to have like 5 people in the house using like one computer and stuff like that.
And one outlet.
Yeah, it was very just stressful.
Thank you.
Yeah, basically the same thing Jabria said. I schedule my classes for classes that I would take online and classes that are meant to be in person. For instance, for math, it's something that I need to take in person. Like there's no way I can take math online. And also with siblings, I had a 3-year-old sister when the pandemic first started, and she wasn't in school yet, and she's busting in my room screaming, and I have to apologize to all my teachers, all my classmates every single time. And yeah, it's a big adjustment though.
Yeah. On a funny side, is your 3-year-old sister still around? Because you said I had, so it made it sound like you got rid of her.
Yeah, she's still around, but she's in school now. So anytime I have to go to class, she's at school. So the house is very quiet now.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, I think what both of you shared is real, because and I think my wife could even speak to it because she is a college professor. And so there were times when we had kids, and so I know my wife, and she'll probably share a little bit more about that. She would say, all right, you just get it out your system, come on kids, and put them on the screen, they'll wave to the students, and then just kind of shake it off. And so if you want to add to that, I'll let you go for it.
Yeah, it's from classroom to classroom was very interesting. Our daycare was able to stay open the whole pandemic. We had a baby during the pandemic, and so it was also very interesting on the professor side. So I've been telling students, like, just know, like, we're all in the pandemic. It's not like it's just the pandemic is affecting undergrads or grad students. Like, we're all in this. So no matter how hard your professors try to front, like, you know, I've had Zoom just cut off. Like, oh, like what happened? Zoom just died and I'm in the middle of lecturing and it's like the last class of the semester. And I'm like, well, that's not the note I wanted to end on. So, you know, just student engagement, a class of 50 students, and you're like, ask a question and it's like crickets. And it's just like, okay, like I still get paid, but like, I'm trying to, you know, we're talking about nutrition. It's not like I'm asking you about like, you know, Pythagoras theory or like, since you brought up math, Angela, like I'm not asking you mathematics, like I'm just asking you your opinion. So on the next few slides, what I really want to quickly show you is some survey that I did with some of my students about, I teach a class on how to design health programs. And so students had to design a virtual health program outreaching to their Xavier peers about being, you know, a college student during COVID. And so you can see that in terms of their health status, most people said good or fair. Like not many people were saying very good or excellent. In terms of how likely they felt like they were to get COVID. And I know some of them actually had COVID already. So somewhat likely, or like majority said somewhat likely. So kind of like, I don't know, I might just, Rona might catch me. I don't know. Like I won't be surprised if I got it. And I do remember like every week the dean would send emails. They don't say like so-and-so has COVID. They said, please excuse so-and-so for class until further notice. Like they don't put your business out, like what your illness is. But it's like, come on, like they already emailed me and told me, Dr. Gross, I won't be in class. My roommate tested positive and I just tested positive. So in terms of finances, a lot of students having a lot more stress than the typical Black student college stress. A lot of people in terms of housing, you know, like a quarter said they had to have a new living situation as a result of the COVID-19, but we know that most students, they just had to leave campus and they had to go back home. So if they weren't local to the area, that was very traumatic. Like a lot of students thinking like, oh, it'll just be for a week or 2 weeks to shut down or whatever. And then the university being like, come back, get your stuff. We're closing down the whole campus. So people coming back from DC, back from Atlanta or California or whatever, and like having to clear out their dorm rooms within a week. So very stressful. Mental health. So talking about their access to mental health care, just trying to find it difficult to get the access to mental health care services that they needed, feeling like the campus has been like neutral or unsupportive. It's like either you're not really helping me or not really hurting me, but helping me, and then, or you're not helping it. Let's see, next slide. So in the chat, or, if y'all want to share verbally, your top 3 health concerns as a college student, and it could be like pandemic specific. On the next slide, I'll show you what were the top concerns that students said. But if you could narrow it down to like the main 3 health concerns, or like the 3 things that are standing in the way of you living your like most excellent, most optimal health and quality of life.
That's just life. Well, as folks are thinking about that, I know some of the things that I've observed as a college counselor from talking with students, talking about health. I think it's been stress, anxiety have been some things that have been said by the folks that I've talked to whenever they're talking about, what's going on with them during this time frame of school, that they're just stressed out because of the classes. Yeah, and so I know I've kind of gave you guys a little bit of time to think of that. Do y'all have any questions? Well, any comments? What are your health concerns that you're experiencing as a college student? And I'll let you guys come off mute and share that.
I think like just in general, just stress and anxiety, because like he had said with the classes, just certain things you just really should be in person. So with it not being that, it's like you have to like find different resources and whatnot. And then some teachers are more understanding than others, so just dealing with that, and then just regular like life things just happening in the midst of the pandemic while still going to school and doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, definitely stress. It's definitely a major one. Just judging by everything that piles up on you with school already. And a pandemic definitely doesn't help, especially when you're in important classes. So it definitely doesn't help. And like Jabria said, some professors are some are more understanding than others. Some teachers just expect you to know the work instead of just walking you through it. But there's so much more going on in the world than just school. So
yeah, I think that's a very great point. I think the pandemic early on, I would say, really helped us better appreciate what's most important in this world, what's most important in our own lives. I think it did cause us to reassess what's important, what's not important. So I do think, to your point, that it has changed a lot in the way we see each other. And so with that, I'm going to move to the next slide to see what those results were. Dr. Gross.
So in this question, we asked them to select up to 5 of the top barriers to their health and quality of life. The first one, as you guys mentioned, just mental health. The second was sleep. And the third was academics. So kind of like, because I'm a college student and like academics is your profession right now, like just navigating the things that come with that when you're already stressed and sleepy, that there's just a lot of taxation on your emotions, your mind, your body, your spirit. The university that I am at is a faith-based institution, Xavier's Catholic. So, we do think about like the spiritual side of students because, that's in alignment with our mission. But, we're holistic people. And so if we're suffering in one area, that's going to spill over to others. So I just wanted to let you know that y'all are not alone. Mental health, sleep, and academics were like some of the biggest things. And we have some direct quotes from students on the next few slides.
So I'm not going to read the quote out loud. I'll allow you guys to read it because that's all you guys are doing now since you're in college is reading. But I will note a couple of things that stand out to me as I look at it. The word terrible is one word that stands out to me. Another word that stands out to me is in that very last sentence, worse. And there's a couple of other things going on within that. But I think those two words, how that student opened the conversation, the college experience now is terrible, and they ended it with college right now is the worst of both worlds. And then in between that sandwich, they actually discuss, being a science major. And to Angelo's point, science classes are one of those things where you need to be hands-on. It's hard to talk about chemistry virtually and not have that teacher come next to your desk and kind of point something to you or put it on a board, or just that interaction of being able to look confused. Your friend looks confused. You look over at them, they look at you, and it's like, yeah, I don't get it. But then that third person is in the back, it's like, nah, it's like this. And it's like, oh, okay. And so I think that whole thing has been really lost with class Zoom, that we can see everybody, but I think at times we get caught up in just looking at each other or kind of doing one of these things where it's like we all dip our head down and we're in our phones and whatnot. So it's been tough. And then on top of that, constantly trying to disinfect. And then again, with the pandemic going on and the rates amongst African Americans being so high, us being a little bit more cautious in certain areas, wearing masks and then wanting to heavily disinfect our room, as the student is saying. Another comment is the one right here on the board, where they talked about adjustments. Adjustments have been hard. Some people just need to ask for help. Some professors don't recognize the workload they provide is too much, or they could care less because the professors are like, I'm going to give them everything they need and they better do it. And I'll come back to them at the end of the semester because I got a lot going on too. And so we're finding that some professors are not compassionate. And so it's like, why are you even in the profession? Are you in the profession to help? Are you in the profession because it pays good? And so I think for me, like I probably keep saying this word throughout the entire session, is compassion. Because I think the biggest lesson for me since the pandemic has happened is compassion for folk. And so I'm interested to see what the world is going to be like, once we get on the other side, once herd immunity is reached, once people are vaccinated, how we actually interact with people. I kind of think it's going to be awkward for a while. I think we're probably going to naturally keep 6 feet distance for a little bit. But then some folks, they'll be like, I'll give you 6 inches because I'm going to be all up on you. So it's going to be interesting once this all ends. Any thoughts, reactions to those quotes that you guys just saw on your screen?
Well, I can relate because my science teacher, she just record the lecture and then post it. We're not able to actually ask her questions unless we go to class. So it kind of like, you don't know what questions other people have to ask. And like, you only asking questions that you think of off the top of your head and not just hearing other people questions, so you're not getting the full experience, and it's kind of, it's not, the main issue is it's not where everyone is in the class. I would have been okay with that, but it's not how it's done. So
yeah, great point. I think that is something I didn't think about that, but you don't get those alternative perspectives. When you have a question and someone comes out like, oh, that's a good question. I know I do that sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. So so we don't get that. Any other thoughts, comments, reactions? Okay. So what is self-care? Someone, go ahead.
So how do you define, and you can do this in the chat, how do you personally define self-care? Like if you have, you couldn't use the phrase self-care, how would you word it? How do you define self-care? And another point is, how is self-care different from selfishness? Because I hear that a lot researching. So originally I want y'all to know, this presentation was for faculty. I did this last summer for faculty, a workshop on being practicing self-care as a research mentor. And so we adapted it for you guys. And so kind of making sure people know that self-care is not selfishness. Like when you're a selfish person, you're self-serving. It's like, I'm going to do things to the detriment of you just because that's my prerogative. That's my goal. So selfishness is destructive, where self-care, because you take care of yourself, you can better serve or better be available to others. So self-care should be really mutually beneficial. Now, some people who are selfish won't like that you practice self-care. But if you have your own personal ideas of self-care or personal definitions, please drop those in the chat, and we'll go to the next slide. So I have a quote here. Self-care is a leadership discipline. So I know it's very evident from Mr. Perry shows how he's designing all of his programming is to really equip you all to be leaders. And so Michael Hyatt, I really, really, really love his podcast and his books. He really talks about self-care is a leadership discipline. Like it, and his daughter, who's now the CEO of his company, says it should be a non-negotiable. Like taking care of yourself should be a non-negotiable. Like, you know, when you're negotiating terms, if you're doing a business deal or a contract or whatever it is, it's like, this is non-negotiable. Like if you're infringing upon my time to take care of myself, my rest, my nutrition, my exercise, like whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, that should be a non-negotiable. So no is a secret weapon, and setting healthy boundaries helps promote self-care and also increase productivity. So one thing I think about for my college students is, well, freshmen normally during like registration, I have them do like a worksheet where they map out like, here are all my classes. Here are the times when I'm going to eat lunch. Here's the times when I'm going to call home. Here's the times when, like, I try to tell them, like, go ahead and put everything, like, try to create a master schedule, because people are going to come at you and say, hey, let's go dip out to Domino's. You don't have Domino's money. You don't really have time. You budgeted to study for math, shout out, or whatever the class is during that time. And so you're going to have to put on your big girl and big boy pants and be able to say no to certain things that, even though they seem fun, like they're going to take you away from like your goal of whatever you schedule your time to be for. So no is a secret weapon. So we came up with this activity, what's on your plate. You know, we use that idiom a lot, like, hey, you know, my plate is full. Oh no, I got too much on my plate. Or let me check what's on my plate. And so, Bantu.
Yeah. And so what's on your plate? Because I did come up with the overwhelmed omelet. Are you a nervous noodles? Do you have anxious asparagus on your plate? What are you eating? What are you eating on? What are you feeding yourself on? Because that what you nourish will flourish. But also stepping back, I thought I had a little flashback when my wife said, do you have Domino's money? She definitely sounded like a mom for a moment. And I think learning to say no to yourself is important. And even saying no to certain feelings, like, no, I will not feel overwhelmed. No, I will not be nervous. No, I will not be anxious at this moment. Yes, I know there's a test, and I know I feel ill prepared for it, but I will go with this mindset that I will do well. As my wife mentioned earlier, like, I'm going to dress the part or look the part at the very least, but I'm not going to beat myself up because I know there will be other opportunities. I'm going to learn to have compassion for myself. I think at times we're just not compassionate enough to ourselves, but more compassionate to others. And so that is something that we as people, human beings, just need to learn to be better about. Anyone can relate to anything that's been shared so far?
Everything.
What was that?
Everything.
Everything. All right. You want to expound on that?
I get overwhelmed at times because I want to do everything and try to get everything done. And then, you know, I'm so anxious and nervous all the time. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, me and Mr. Scholes were talking a little bit earlier today about our overwhelming list. And I think one of the things that he and I both can agree on, we need to learn to better prioritize. Because I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we can write down all the things we need to do for that week. And then at the end of the week, we can look back at that list and be like, I didn't do this. And it's like, maybe this wasn't as big of a priority as I thought it was. And so I think as we get better at planning out our weeks and looking at the tasks we have, then we can better learn like, okay, what's a priority and what's not. I know for myself in my passion planner, it helps me because I have like errands, I have top priority, then I have priority. And at times I put things in my top priority that should really just be an errand or shouldn't be on there. Like I might have a cup of coffee as a top priority. It's like, no, like that's a normal thing. Like I could put that down. Now, in some cases, it could be a top priority. Like I just need to get away because, it's stressful or whatnot. And so I think learning to prioritize, it's a ongoing thing. It's you have to mature into that. Let's try to get out of that mindset of I need to know how to do it right now, because that causes a lot of stress. And when you realize that you don't know it right now, it makes you feel overwhelmed, and you're digging back into that overwhelmed omelet or that anxious asparagus. You need to get away from that. Scrape that off your plate. And so, what is self-care? Self-care is what people do for themselves to establish and maintain their health. And also to prevent and deal with illness. There's a lot of studies out there. My wife can probably talk to you ad nauseum about them, about how there is a lot of evidence out there that talks about how, some of those feelings and all the emotions that we allow ourselves to have can lead to high blood pressure, maybe even diabetes, heart attack, stroke, all those, death row lineup type things that we need not take part in. And so there's a little bit on here about hygiene, nutrition, lifestyle, environmental factors, socioeconomic factors, and self-medication. I know for me, my lifestyle is important. So I like working out. Working out for me has been a energy builder and also as a stress reducer. So there's times where I'm like, I'm doing the Zoom advising, and it's like, okay, I'm tired. I want to go take a nap. And it's like, oh, if I take a nap, well, as an adult now, our naps are, you go to sleep when it's daylight and you wake up and it's nighttime. And it's like, oh crap, I got to pick up kids, got to cook dinner. And so I know I can't take naps during the day. And so instead it's like, I'm going to go to the gym for a quick pick me up. And so what are your things that you do for a quick pick me up when you're feeling down, when you're feeling low on energy? What are you eating? I try to have trail mix on hand because I know that'll pick me up. I know a Snicker bars will put me down. I know that Bear Claw that my children had this morning will make me sleepy and not great for this presentation. So instead, let me eat an egg on some toast with some avocado. Like that'll pick me up, and that way I can be energized. And then maybe once I get off this call, I can go dig into one of those apple fritters. And so just being wise about that and how you manage your energy. So self-care. And so you see in this word cloud, all these different things. And so with that on your screen, what are some words that stand out to you that as you look at it, it's like, I can relate to that. Like, yes, give me more of that.
Exercise.
Yeah, amen to that. Anybody else?
A healthy diet.
Yeah, healthy diet. And when you think of the word diet, what do you think of when you see that word diet? What comes to mind?
Just like food, like just of substance. And I'm saying that just personally, I've noticed I don't have like a very big appetite. So I'm always wondering like why I'm so tired and stuff. It's like, oh, well, your blood sugar's low because you haven't eaten almost like 13 hours. It's like stuff like that. Just keeping up on just routine things that you should be doing to make sure you're good throughout the day.
Perfect. Yeah. Even that word diet can be stressful at times. I remember my wife had broke it down to me, and diet is just, your eating pattern. What are you eating? At times people think a word diet and think the first thing that comes to mind is I can't eat this. And it's like, no, you can eat this and you can eat that. And so if you want, Dr. Gross, you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I teach, my undergrad is in nutrition, and the word diet it can induce a lot of guilt because we have to eat we need calories to sustain ourselves. And so if you have 3 meals a day and 3 snacks, there's several times a day to feel guilty about what you are or are not eating. So you just want to try to make better choices more often than trash choices. And it's not that you can't have, say, a hot sausage po' boy every now and then. Like that's my once a month. It's really special. Or you can't ever have Popeyes. We have Popeyes maybe once a month. Like we make those things special, right? As a college student, thinking about your financial constraints and different things, healthy diet is definitely, probably one of the harder things to do, more so than exercise and the other things. So again, just try to make better options within the control of your money. Next slide. The quote here, which is interesting, is actually a professor talking about, shifting from self-neglect to self-care as someone that helps to nurture a lot of students. So again, you're not alone. And sometimes you have to kind of model that for your professors. There was a young lady, and she's now probably working on her PhD because she was just that sharp. She was like, I do self-care Saturdays. And I was like, man, what is that? She's like, I pamper myself. And then she's like, and I always get good sleep. That's why my grades are so well, because I prioritize my sleep. So give yourself a break. No one is perfect. That's included in taking care of yourself is like giving yourself, as Dr. Bantu said, compassion. We have to practice grace and self-compassion and not beat ourselves up a lot, because that can also be stressful. Like, oh man, I didn't do so hot on that class. Or I think Jabri said she has an exam coming up today. It's like, all of these things. So like if we're rehearsing these negative thoughts, we're going to then eat negative choice, like pick negative choices. So self-care really is the foundation of healthcare. It's not about going to your doctor, going to your nurse practitioner, going to the clinic. It's really how well you take care of yourself that positions you to be in better health if you ever need to engage with the healthcare system. And we know, a lot of people have talked about institutionalized racism and not getting respectful care when we do get to interact with the healthcare system. So by taking care of yourself, not only do you save money on medical bills, but you reduce the amount of interactions you have to deal with the healthcare, because in America, especially, we do a lot of pill pushing, treatment, reactive healthcare instead of prevention. So self-care is the first area where we need to focus on wellness and prevention. So here's some areas or some components to think about. Self-care prevents illness and promotes wellness. So this is the wellness wheel, and you can see some of the different dimensions there. Your physical, your social, and we know that especially because of the pandemic and social distancing and virtual interactions, like people's social wellness has taken such a big hit that it's impacted everything else, right? So if one piece of the pie is struggling, then the whole pie is struggling. So this is an active process where you want to be aware of the choices you make and really aim to live your best life in all of these categories, understanding that each one is important. So really simply on this chart, it just talks about when there's a lack of self-care, some of the things that we see: burnout, compassion fatigue. So some of your professors, like if they even were compassionate, they have compassion fatigue at this point because there's just like so much draining on them. So lack of self-care, more stress and anxiety, worse health outcomes. But when you can regularly practice self-care, and one tip I would give you is try to get 30 minutes or an hour more sleep. If you're not getting around the window of 7 to 8, see if try to, give yourself an extra hour sleep, budget it in, and see if it doesn't make a difference in everything else. You will have less stress and anxiety and better health outcomes.
All right. So Many of you guys may not know him, but one of his infamous lines is, practice what you preach. And so one of the reasons why I like that song so much is when I was a freshman at Xavier, every time I went to the lunchroom, that song came on. And so what we want to talk about now is actually practicing self-care, because up until this point, we've been giving you the gospel of self-care. And so now we want to kind of give you guys some practical tools on how to employ it. And so what you see up here is a self-care wheel. And so you'll see the different elements on it. And so I want you guys to take a look at it, study it, and think about it a little bit, and think to yourselves as you look at it, how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being lowest, 10 being the highest? And also, what areas are you strong in? Which areas are you weak in? And then brainstorm at least 2 new ways to practice self-care in your weakest dimensions. And then also, I would even add on there, think of 2 ways to continue to add on to your strengths. So also take a strength-based approach rather than such a negative deficit approach. So yeah, so as you're taking a look at that, I think to myself, one area is professional. I know one of the ways that I wanted to improve as a professional was being more present, trying to be more mindful with students when I was talking with them. I think at times you can kind of get into a routine and kind of think, okay, well, this is how this student's gonna be. You kind of put people in boxes and you stereotype, you know? And so learning like, no, let me be more mindful when I'm talking with students and really be in the moment and present. And so does anyone have a reaction, comment, thought they'd like to add to that self-care wheel? Okay, let's look at it with some more language on it. Maybe that'll spark some interest and some thoughts. And so on here, I look at psychological. One of those things, I have a background in counseling. And so I used to really be a big proponent of journaling. My wife still practices journaling, and I think for her, she finds it as a very useful tool. And she's to the point to where she's been journaling now for a couple of years. And so she was actually able to read this day last year where her mind was, and then able to journal today how she feels. And so next year, if she continues that trend, she'll be able to look back and be like, wow, I've grown. Or if this happened, oh yeah, that made me happy, or whatnot, or that was the lesson I've learned from. And there's also some other things on here. Are there any items on here that stand out to anybody that you want to practice, or any area that you currently practice? Is anybody in here gardening? Is anyone in here practicing self-love? Does anyone do affirmations? Is anybody in here sleeping? I know John Driel mentioned being up for 13 hours a day or something like that, something crazy.
Yeah, I think I like getting enough sleep. Like I've noticed, like I'll be fine, but then let's say I have like a day or something to do nothing, I waste my entire day catching up. I fell in the sleep I should have had the entire week.
Yeah. And sleep is one of those things that you can't catch up on. Having my wife, again, who is a public health professional, she tells me these things. You can't catch up on until either you get it or you don't. So you can sleep in an extra 2 hours on Saturday, but it won't make up anything. It just means you slept an extra 2 hours. And so on here, we want to talk a little about some ways to practice self-care as we come to a close. So try to follow 8 hours of sleep, 8 servings of fruits and veggies, 8 glasses of water, 8 minutes of mindfulness, 8 meaningful connections, 8. Try to do as much as you can of these things. I know one of those things that I do is try to drink a lot of water. And I know earlier on the call, I saw Angelo taking a swig from his water jug. So it looks like he's definitely practicing it. And Perry's making that face because like, yeah, it was pretty impressive that he does that. And it's something you should keep doing as you continue to mature and as you grow. Another thing too, I think people find a hard time doing is the fruits and veggies. And then also, as our favorite college student just mentioned, the sleep. Sleep is very difficult at times. And I think another one too, it's hard right now with the social isolation, but meaningful connections. I think early on in the pandemic, one of the things I did was I reached out to friends I hadn't talked to in a while. And so maybe that's something we can continue doing. All right, and so here are some resources. I'll let you guys look at American Psychological Association, Psychology Today, Healthy Monday, USDA My Plate, to think about some of the ways you can eat better. Another online resource that I would not advise too much of is Facebook. Facebook can not be so much about self-care. It can be some self-harm at times if we're not careful with it.
Social media in general, because like Facebook could die this week, which it won't, but if something else came up, there are healthy ways to engage with social media, because it can make you be in your feelings if it looked like someone has a better life than you during a pandemic. It's like, how are you in Saint-Tropez in the middle of a pandemic? I am jealous. I can't go anywhere. I can't have a PF change tonight. Like, just like whatever it is, it can. Gratitude is a great self-care tool, especially if you want to start journaling. It could be, or even if you don't want to journal, like before you get out your bed, what's one thing that you're grateful for from the past day, or before you go to sleep, just like regularly making sure that you're checking in on how, there are things going right in the world. Versus always focusing on what seems to be out of whack or what seems to not be great. Michael Hyatt, I mentioned one of his podcasts in the chat, Focus on This, which has some really great principles on like time management and boundaries, self-care. They had an episode this week about the importance of having a hobby, like something where it's just fulfilling because you choose to do it. I'm like, I need a hobby. I need like a new hobby, like a hobby that I will consistently engage in. And so, there's hobbies of different price points, but he had a really cool thing about the self-care scorecard. So today we talked about college students in pandemic hell, defining what self-care is. It's not selfish. Everyone should do it, and try to give you some resources on how to practice self-care. So going back to the plate, thinking about what can I remove? What can I reduce? And what can I replace? So there's also some really good resources on how to actually study based on neuroscience, because if you're cramming thinking you're studying, you're not really absorbing the material or working with how your brain best absorbs new information. So when you go to take the assessment, you still bomb it and you're like, but I studied for 10 hours. No, you crammed for 10 hours. You was already sleep deprived. You were already hungry and already mean. So how did you think cramming for 10 hours was going to actually be the success strategy? So I'll try to find that link really quick and put it in the chat, the study cycle from LSU.
Yeah, so thank you all for participating and learning a little bit more about self-care, what to keep on your plate and what to remove. And thank you, Mr. Scholes, for inviting us.
Yeah, this has been awesome. So in my quest to be a lifelong learner, I learned a bunch this morning. And so, the one thing I struggled with is, I sort of feel like at times I have to be selfish to practice self-care, because I have to say, like, I'm going to protect myself to get to that space where, even in relationships with my family, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that and allow you to take me there. And I feel selfish there, but I feel like that's the thing I need to do to, Dr. Bantu, as you were talking about, not go into a space where I don't want to go, or it's going to spiral, if you will. So I kind of like beat up on myself at times because I feel like I'm being selfish, but it's intentional selfishness. So I don't know if your thoughts about that. So
yeah, it's intentional self-preservation and protection, because it doesn't mean, and sometimes we have to be armed with how to say no in ways that let the person know I'm not just saying no to be petty. I actually do love you, but right now I'm like, I'm no good to you nor myself. So no is a complete sentence I've also learned. So it's not that you necessarily have to give all this backstory, but depending on, the closeness of the relationship and how meaningful that person is to you, you can give a little bit of extra of like, you know what, like I want to say yes, I want to be there to support you in this way, but at this time, I don't have the capacity. I don't have the capacity. Like follow up with me after, like, here's a better window of time. That book, Boundaries by Towson and Cloud, I think they're both psychologists, was great to think about, like, how to have healthy boundaries with family, because especially during the pandemic, like you may not be able to have those physical boundaries. So you have to check people like,
Yep.
Which we do pretty well with our little ones. It's like, no, like this is mommy's time to do whatever, this is my space to do whatever. So and I think kids if we don't model that for kids, like little ones, or if we as mentors and coaches, if we don't model that for the people that we're working under, they're gonna wash, rinse, repeat what we do that's not healthy, and it's gonna continue this culture. So,
yep. Thank you for that. And I will say that for me, social media is a connection to family. And so everything you intake, I think you should have a perspective of why you're using it. Because I strictly use it as a way for me to connect with my family in a positive way, or friends that have in a positive way, and not engage in sort of political petty discussions that go on there that sort of make me want to lose my mind at times. But there is a positive way to engage in some of those things that give you a breakaway from some of the work that you might do. And so I'm like super excited that you both joined us today. I'm really interested in this sort of neuroscience of studying, and I would love to sort of have you guys come back and maybe talk about that with the students, because I do think understanding how your brain works and how to engage with it in its natural rhythm is something that I think as you mature in life is a good thing for us to understand, from biases to studying to this whole idea of multitasking. We have a whole bunch of notions about things that aren't congruent with the way our brain works. So it's a great topic. So thank you very much for being here, and I really enjoyed it.
The Center for Academic Success at LSU, Dr. Sandra McGuire, phenomenal Black woman, was the director when I was an undergrad. So those same resources that I encountered as an undergrad, I print out those same worksheets and share it with my undergrads, because I'm like, look, she's award-winning for a reason. Like, just reuse these resources. So the Center for Academic Student Success at LSU is a great resource, and they have all. And I put some links in the chat. I can repost it.
Yes, great. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks everybody for joining today, and this will be posted on our website. So if you want to give another review, if you missed any pieces of it, you can go to internshiptalent.org in about 48 hours, and we'll have it posted. So thanks everybody.
Happy finals.
Happy finals.